Hi, folks, and welcome to another edition of Voices of Resilience. My name is Eric Mucky, and I'm CEO and Executive Director of Lost&Found. Lost&Found is a Sioux Falls-based 501c3 nonprofit that provides comprehensive suicide prevention strategies and programs for young adults 15 to 34. And Voices of Resilience is a place where we talk about the ways that folks take on everyday challenges and obstacles and everyday work that helps all of us provide resilience for ourselves, for others, and for community. Today, we have a really fortunate opportunity to talk about a topic that really isn't always talked about that often in South Dakota, and that is suicide loss. You may know some of the statistics if you're watching when it comes to suicide in South Dakota, how it impacts our communities. Suicide is the second leading cause of death, for example, for age brackets between the age of 10 and 34. But it's also a prevalent impact in ways that may not show up in everyday data that you might see. And what we really are here to talk about today is sort of how suicide loss has helped a member of our community, in the Sioux Falls community especially, transform and learn from the experience and share that experience to provide sort of empathy and support and really truly systemic support to others in our community as well. So before we start every episode, I want to give a shout out to our two sponsors that are making this conversation possible today, American Bank and Trust and Astrup Family Foundation. These two organizations have really been financial sponsors to Lost&Found from the very beginning and have helped us kick off our work in larger ways in South Dakota, both online and face-to-face when COVID, of course, allows us to be face-to-face in a socially distant manner. And so if you want to learn more about our sponsors, you can go to abt.bank, American Bank and Trust. You can learn more about the offerings and the banking services they offer in the Sioux Falls area and throughout the state of South Dakota. You can also go to the astrupfamilyfoundation.org to learn about the ways that the Astrup family, based in Rochester, Minnesota, is using their experiences and their philanthropy to advance family values, education, and healthcare in our region. We have a really special guest today joining us, someone who is a leader in our Sioux Falls community, but someone who I've gotten to know very well over the past couple of years as the current advisor of the Augustana University Lost&Found chapter. And so to give us kind of a sense of where we're coming from today, I want to introduce Wendy Mamer. And Wendy has a story to share. Many of you watching may know Wendy's experience from sharing her experience as a suicide loss survivor during a TEDx talk given in Sioux Falls this past year. What we also are excited to hear from her today is about her work as the first Augustana University Lost&Found chapter advisor. Wendy is a associate director of admissions at Augustana University and currently has a great experience to share as far as sort of the Augustana Lost&Found chapter is concerned. So I really want to get her on the call here, get started, and introduce you to Wendy. Hey, Wendy.
Hello, I'm excited to be here.
Glad you can make it. So Wendy, I want to start off with first and foremost, you gave us a TEDx talk published in September 2020 titled Survivor of Suicide Loss, a title I never wanted. We'll talk about that title and we'll get to sort of the impacts and sort of what that's meant to you. But first, really want to hear first, what are some of your other titles?
Oh, this is a tough one. I would definitely say friend. I love the title of friend. I try to be a friend and a listening ear to everyone who I encounter and come across. Also, I'm a wife. I'm married to my husband, Kyle, daughter to my father who passed away and my mom, Patty. And then, I just try to be a role model also for students in the Augustana community and throughout the community of Sioux Falls too, when it comes to mental health advocacy. An advocate too, I would probably add that title to my list as well.
Love it. I know I'm curious too, as you've gone away. So many of those titles have been chosen for you. Sort of, what are some of the titles you've chosen for yourself as you've gone through your career and kind of foraying into this world as being an advocate?
Yeah. Oh, man, this is tough. I would say, yeah, survivor of suicide loss. I mean, I know that was the title of my TED Talk, but yeah, just being a survivor and being someone to push through that really, really tough time in my life. I feel like there are a lot of different connotations that can come along with it, but I think that one's probably the most near and dear to my heart, just because of everything that happens after a suicide. You know, a lot of times there are suicides to come after that, just like kind of like a domino effect. And so I'm determined not to let that happen to me. And so survivor is probably the one that's most important to me.
How did you come to be a survivor of suicide loss? Kind of diving into our topic for today.
Yeah. Obviously, like I said, title I never wanted, but when I was 23 years old, my dad died by suicide, and came out of nowhere, and really nothing you can ever prepare yourself for. And it was a title I'd never heard of, honestly, until there was an event in Sioux Falls surrounding Survivor of Suicide Loss Day. And then that's when I came across that for the first time. And that really stuck and resonated. And again, title I never wanted, but a title that I'm working to do something with and make progress, so hopefully other people don't have to carry that title as well.
And I'm glad you were able to find the group and kind of find sort of a place to connect and find the community. So kind of before we dive too far into that, tell us about your dad. What was life like with your dad?
Yeah, my dad, him and I were super, super close. So grew up on a farm in Southwest Minnesota. And so, yeah, he was a farmer through and through in the field, always worked super hard, but also made time to spend with all of his kids. And him and I got to be really close. He would always take me to my basketball tournaments on the weekends, and come to all my sporting events, my track meets, different things like that. And so, always between him and my mom, they're both my biggest cheerleaders. And so, yeah, just he was a friend to everybody, super outgoing, and involved in our community and our church, and really was an exemplary person. And so I think that's really important to share, that just to shed light on that it can happen to anyone, even the happiest people and some of the best people you know. Depression and anxiety really has no boundaries, and it can affect everyone so differently. And so, yeah, he was so much more than his mental illnesses, and it came as a shock to a lot of people. And so, yeah, I think it's important to show that it can really happen to anybody.
Thanks for sharing that, Wendy. And as I've said to you many times before, I'm very sorry for your loss. And I know for all of us at Lost and Found, there's nothing worse than experiencing that pain. So I appreciate your willingness to share that today, so people kind of get the point that you're putting across, really, which is this can happen to anybody. And what I really want to kind of dive into, I guess, you talked about finding a community and finding a place to share your story. I can't imagine, you said it's a title you never wanted. I don't think any of us ever want to have that title, but going into that space, what were you feeling, and sort of what did you sort of gain from finding that community when you were able to find it in Sioux Falls?
Yeah, so it wasn't like a group where we would all sit down and talk. It was just an event for the Survivor of Suicide Loss Day. And so what happened is it was at the Butterfly House, and the Helpline Center had put it on. And so it was releasing a butterfly for those that people have lost to suicide, loved ones. And so going there, I, first of all, didn't expect to see as many people there. I guess I didn't realize how many people suicide has affected, especially just because mental health in general has not been something that's been openly talked about for a long time. I feel like we're slowly starting to see those barriers of stigma being brought down. And so I guess I just didn't really realize how many people it affected. And so the amount of people that I saw there was really heartbreaking. But also it's just a place where you finally don't feel alone, because which isn't a good thing by any means, but it's just like there are other people who feel that pain too. And so, yeah, it was just like a feeling of great, deep sadness seeing the amount of people that were there, but also like, I don't know, just being around people who finally understand what you're going through, because the average person probably doesn't.
Yeah, and I can understand like that there is such a uniqueness to that experience that it would be very difficult to find a lot of people, fortunately or unfortunately, I guess, that have gone through that experience, depending on how you look at it. I am curious too. So in that process, you know, tell me about sort of this transition or this journey that you took to say, okay, I've experienced loss. I lost somebody I so deeply care about, and I have these great memories and these great moments that I've had, and someone I was very close with. What was the transition for you? You know, you came to this event, you found sort of a place where there are other survivors. What ultimately led you to give a TEDx talk? I'm really curious about sort of what was that journey, where was that path like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I certainly haven't always been in this place where I'm comfortable talking about it. I've always been open about it, but speaking it out loud on the TEDx stage was something that I feel like I wasn't necessarily prepared for until recently. So right after my dad passed away, or when my dad passed away, I was actually working in psychiatric residential treatment. And so I was around mental health concerns and mental illnesses every day when I went to work. And I really, really loved that job. I don't know that I've had a job ever that I've really felt like confident in what I was doing, and like that's what I was really meant to be doing. But then after my dad passed away, I knew that that probably wasn't the best environment for me to be in anymore. I needed to take care of myself and get to a place where I could process my grief effectively. Whereas when I worked there, it was kind of like I was at home and I would think about it, and then I'd have to go to work and shut that part of my life off. So that way I could be the best at my job. And so I left that job in treatment, and then I went to Augustana, and I thought that was me distancing myself from it. And it was completely different. But also then I realized that as I was reading applications, essays would come in, and students, there were a bunch of students experiencing the effects of mental illness, and whether it was themselves or a sibling or a parent, it was just like, wherever I went, even when I thought I was kind of escaping that world, it still followed me. And so I'm still able to fulfill that passion of mine and get that advocacy work in, just in a different way. And then we got the Lost&Found chapter created at Augustana. Shout out to Haley Nold, an amazing student leader who worked with me to bring that to Augie. But once we got that rolling a little bit, I really started feeling more comfortable talking about mental health again and mental illness, and really wanted to make it a place that was better for students, and where they felt more comfortable and like they could be open with themselves and with me. And so then the TEDx application opened up, and actually the first deadline of it passed, and then they extended the deadline, and one of my friends brought up that she was applying and that maybe I should apply too. And so then, sent in my application, and ended up being chosen, and was able to have that incredible opportunity. And as great as it seemed on the stage that night, and it was hard, obviously, that wasn't an easy process for me. I really hadn't thought in depth about my experience with losing my dad for quite a while. It's just not something I necessarily want to think about every day, but that really made me sit down and put everything into words. And it was a lot more emotional than I anticipated leading up to it. But ultimately, it's been amazing. The response I've received has been amazing. And I always said if it just helped just one person, then that's all that really mattered to me. And so I hope it did that.
Well, I would have to say I think it did, Wendy, because the response I've seen this, our community's seen this, it's overwhelming. And I think having heard your story and being able to share that with others it's tremendously impactful. So thank you for showing your bravery and willingness to share your story in that way. One thing I am curious about too, you mentioned something in the talk that I think folks might want to kind of dip into and learn more about. So you talk about in your TEDx talk, you describe sort of opening up about your dad's mental illness or mental health conditions on social media and kind of the path that it took, or the toll that it took on him. How did you expect people to respond to the news, and sort of maybe there was a difference, maybe it was different than, or, the same as what you expected, but sort of how did people actually respond to that on social media?
Yeah, so that was a really tough decision to make. This was all taking place back in about 2016, 2017. I can't believe it's been that long already. But and like I said, back then, even just 5 years ago, mental illness and mental health was talked about so differently. And so when everything first started happening with my dad, we didn't really say much because, one, we didn't really know what was going on and what the future was going to hold either. When it started to get really bad, his depression and anxiety, to the point where he would go inpatient at Avera Behavioral. And so we didn't really know also what was going on. And so it was hard to explain to other people too. And there were a lot of questions being asked, and a lot of people were afraid to ask us. And it was genuine concern, I would say, but it was just like such an uncomfortable topic and so much different from, I feel like, the place where we're at now. And so we didn't really say much to begin with. And then eventually one day it was just like, okay, we're kind of done having other people write the narrative for us, and we're just going to be open and come forth with exactly what we're going through. And it was, so then I made this Facebook status and saying everything that was going on, and all of a sudden it was by far my most liked post I'd ever posted. I think there was probably almost 400 likes, which was very, very shocking to me. But then it was the messages that started coming in after that were like, oh my gosh, like I'm going through the same thing and I don't know what to do. And it was just like a very incredible response that I wasn't ready for necessarily or expecting. And so that really, again, it was that like contradicting, like, this is so heartbreaking, but finally I don't feel alone anymore. Like, other people are going through it too. And it was, it was powerful, but also just so sad to realize that, like, so many people are experiencing this, but nobody's talking about it, and people are scared to talk about it. And so, it was quite the response. And I think even since then, I would say probably, I can confidently say my most liked posts on social media, even now, still are about me sharing my experiences, because I think people relate to that more than all the good parts of my life that I post.
I think it says a lot for the willingness and vulnerability you share. And I think just talking about that topic alone, I had to share a comment here with you. Thank you, Tiffany, for sharing this. And I agree. Thank you for sharing your vulnerability, Wendy, for all of us. I think it's super important to get this message out and be able to, for people to know that this is an experience that has happened. And I guess maybe a bit of a more obvious question, what has this change for you meant in terms of your own vulnerability? How have you been able to navigate that and be able to share your story?
I think it's made me more comfortable to just be really honest about all of my experiences, especially even that have followed followed my dad's death, and just I'm not scared anymore, because I think one thing I've learned since then is just like everyone experiences deep hurt in their life, and it may be different, but in a sense it is the same. And that's kind of like almost a direct quote from my TED Talk, that it just like nobody's life is perfect, but yet we all hold ourselves to the standard that it should be, and we have all these expectations of what we think our life should be like, or what it is like. And so I feel like me being honest and just like with the real stuff that I've gone through, I think it's just a lot easier now that I did it once to be able to continue to do it, because the response was so well received. And yeah, I just hope to continue to share my experiences in a real and honest way, and not a way that just portrays the good in everything too, because I think we're all a lot more connected in our pain than we realize. And the storylines will be different, but the underlying inevitable life challenges that get thrown at us, a lot of them are pretty similar.
Thank you for that, Wendy. And I really appreciate sort of this pathway to say there's a lot of commonality in the pain that we share. Just in the same way we try to see commonality in, our favorite artist or our favorite song, or whatever that looks like for us, maybe a little bit more lighthearted. There's something interesting about that commonality we have in pain. And I thank you for sharing that. I do want to take a quick breather here and just kind of pause for a minute. Think about sort of what the next stage is. And what I really want to transition to next, Wendy, is just kind of diving into sort of how is this transition into sort of the ways you speak and the ways that you advocate. Before I go too far down the line, for those of you watching, thank you for tuning in. I do want to give you a quick shout out to the Augustana Lost&Found chapter, which I'm sure Wendy will dive into a little bit more next. But if you want to follow the work of the Augustana Lost&Found chapter, you can find Augie at We Are Here Augie on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, correct? Or is it just Facebook and Instagram at this point? I think it's just Facebook and Instagram, but
I'm not sure. I think it's just Facebook and Instagram.
We'll just stick to Facebook and Instagram. Go to We Are Here Augie, search for this here, and follow the Augustana Lost&Found chapter. So, Wendy, as you're thinking about sort of, okay, we've gone through the TED Talk, we're sort of thinking about the importance of vulnerability and where things need to go. We've talked a little bit about what good comes from being vulnerable too. I am curious from your experiences, thinking of your dad was a farmer. We've been hearing a lot more discussion and topics discussed or brought up around rural mental health and farmer mental health. From your perspective, sort of, what are some of the aspects that you saw in your own life experience, your dad's life experience as a farmer, and sort of how did mental health show up that way because of the experience of being a farmer?
Yeah, I think there are a couple different aspects for sure. So I would say that nothing is guaranteed when you're a farmer. I mean, your whole life is based around your crop and your livestock that are affected by so many things, basically everything that's outside of your control, whether it's the weather or grain prices that are fluctuating up and down. It's like there's no control other than making sure you get that crop in the field and you get your livestock fed every night, or every day. And so it's just like everything else is kind of left up to things that are beyond your control. And I think that becomes really difficult. And the income flow isn't steady every year. And it's just like there's a lot of factors that you just have no say in. And I think that is really, really difficult there without the consistency. And then also they spend their days alone oftentimes. And sure, yeah, you'll get coffee with the other farmers in the area, or see them around town at the grain elevator or the local tractor dealership, different things like that. But otherwise, it's like you're in a tractor driving 4 miles an hour, going up and down the roads, and it's just a lot of time to think without verbalizing any of the emotions that you're feeling or the thoughts that you're having. And I think that makes it really, really difficult. Hours are long. It's a incredibly physical job too, and so there's just a lot of factors that go into it that that kind of build up, and I think are a reason why farmers are at a higher risk for suicide than some other occupations. And so definitely, and the stress in the seasons too. Like I said, my dad would the couple or few times that he was in the hospital, it was always around planting season or harvest season, and I just the stress of those seasons. Those are the busy peak seasons where you're working 12 hours or more a day, and also having to rely on those factors, like I was saying, that are not in your control. So it's like you have an idea of what you want to be doing, you know what needs to happen, but there's a lot of other factors that come into play in order for that to do so. And so I think that that's a huge reason why we see larger difficulties in the area of suicide with farmers.
And based on your experience, Wendy, I'm curious, if you had sort of a recommendation for folks to really think about sort of how they can help a farmer that might be dealing with potential for suicide risk. What's your take? What would you recommend folks look for help?
Yeah, I would say just familiarizing yourself with resources. One thing that I always say when I'm talking with a student or a friend, it's like, I am not a counselor and you are not a counselor. You cannot fix it. And it's not your job to fix it. And this mental health is so complex. So the best thing that you can familiarize yourself with is the resources in your area that you may have, which I know in rural areas sometimes is quite a bit more difficult, but also different like numbers that you can call. For example, in South Dakota, there's 211, there's a farmer stress hotline through Avera, and familiarizing yourself with those resources, familiarizing yourself with the signs of suicide or the signs and symptoms of depression, anxiety, just noticing different changes in behavior that are very uncommon for the person that you love and care about. And I think that that's a really good place to start. And again, not putting the pressure on yourself to have all the answers because you won't. And it's creating those boundaries, I think, is super, super important.
That's super helpful, Wendy. Thanks for sharing that. And I know we're getting some really good comments in here. I had to share those with you just so you can take a look. And coming back to that conversation about vulnerability, I think folks are really watching this right now, Wendy, and really getting a great sense of the kind of person you are and the ways you've been able to navigate such difficulty. It really speaks volumes, I think, of who you are, Wendy. So I figured I'd share these with you, and being able to share, folks have been watching your TED Talk, of course, and being able to bring that into the conversation. So thanks, folks, for tuning in, and thanks, folks, for sharing those comments with Wendy. So you talked a little bit about, and it's kind of funny, right? You're talking about trying to essentially move away from what was an extraordinarily difficult period in your life and continues to be there in your life to go to Augustana. And you're talking about sort of that transition and maybe putting some distance between, but obviously that didn't happen. So I'm curious, how have you been able to take sort of this vulnerability and this openness and this new learning that you've had to help students at Augustana?
Yeah, so this is a big question, I feel like, because there's so many different aspects of my job where mental health comes into play, whether it's as an admission counselor or as the advisor for Lost&Found. And there's a fine line, and because at Augustana too, like I have to maintain, like I am not a counselor, but I have to know the resources. And I think really I've never been more utilized in this area. I feel like after my TED Talk was released, I feel like my vulnerability connected with students who I didn't even necessarily, I wasn't their admission counselor, or maybe I'd never even interacted with them before, but they felt comfortable with me, that they could be open about their imperfections or maybe what they were struggling with, and that I would have ideas for what I could do to maybe help them find the resources that they need. And I think that comes hand in hand with being the advisor of Lost and Found as well, and having knowledge about the resources that we have on campus. And so starting there for like that's kind of like the reactive part of my job. So when students come to me and then me help them. But then I also am really, really working towards creating a more proactive culture when it comes to taking care of ourselves and knowing the resources. And that's where kind of my admission counselor role plays into it a little bit. So like I said, we would see applications come in, essays about students maybe with their own struggle with mental health or with a parent, and how they've had to be present in that situation and work through it and in a way that was best for them. But then there are also struggles that come along with being the child of a parent with a mental illness too. And so just reading those and thinking, okay, what can we do to make this better, to make them feel like they will be supported here? And statistics show largely that there are higher percentages of students coming in with past counseling experiences, so seeing counselors in high school. And so then I was thinking, okay, so let's create some messaging that we can send out to students before they even get here and show them all the resources that they have that will be helpful to them and that they have access to, so they can be proactive in maintaining the progress that they've made. And so that's something that I've done on the admission side of things too. And yeah, just being open about the fact that this transition is hard. And that's a whole nother aspect that goes into it, is the transition from high school to college is really hard. And it was hard for me, even when the situation with my dad wasn't necessarily in the same place as it was when I was making that transition. And so, yeah, just trying to get the resources out there early and often. And so they know that they're not alone and that there are different resources in place to help them succeed at Augustana. And I will also add on to this, sorry, to
keep
go off
going.
on this tangent, but mental health so much affects your mental health and you don't really realize it. So it's not even just about students coming in with prior counseling experiences that need that support. It's even the best students, the straight A students, and coming in and maybe learning how their time management will affect their mental health, or how academics, I mean, when you start struggling in school, but just because college is so much harder than it was for a student in high school, I mean, that can have effects on their mental health that were never there before. And so how can we be the most proactive in getting every single resource that we have at Augustana out there so every student can succeed?
I love the thorough nature that you're taking with this, Wendy. I think it's really a testament to sort of channeling everything you possibly can into this job. The students that are coming into you and the students you work with are very lucky to have you.
Thank you.
I am curious too. So that was a big question. I apologize for making it very large, but like thinking about it even more so from the angle of you worked with a fantastic student leader in Haley Nold. Haley, we hope you're watching. Thank you for all you do at Augie. Based on that experience and finding Haley and sort of working into the space of being a Lost and Found chapter advisor at Augustana, what sort of impact have you seen from that work on campus?
Yeah, so this is a little tricky just because we kind of started establishing ourselves at the beginning of the global pandemic. And so everything kind of had to shift quite a bit than what we were anticipating. And so we really have tried to take a look at kind of like our student needs on campus and then start tailoring some of our programming more towards that. But we've also had some great things happen already. I think we've seen a lot of benefits from partnering with other student organizations on campus and other offices throughout campus as well. And so, for example, one project that we were really proud of and proud to partner with our diversity, equity, and inclusion office was it was kind of Zoom sessions focusing on systemically non-dominant student populations and how that relates to mental health. So, for example, we had a Black psychologist come on and over Zoom and kind of really have a great conversation about the effects of mental health, especially on our Black community at Augustana, given everything that happened this summer with the murder of George Floyd and things like that. And so just really more specific conversations focusing on different demographics around campus. And so that was one project that we were really proud to partner with other student leaders on campus and be able to hold. And a lot more coming up too. We just had one last night actually with the Student Success Center about time management and mental health and how they are connected too. So it's been really good to kind of take a look at, okay, what are we seeing our needs are on campus within the student body, and how can we create programming to match that. And I think there's been a lot of great response from students and from our student body as they see mental health as a growing concern as well.
I love it. Well, and I love that we're able to partner with you, Wendy, but I know just being able to see the students really take hold of this and say, this is ours. This is our issue. This is our challenge, and be able to take ownership of that is really special. So Again, I can't commend you enough. It's like, Wendy, you're so great at what you're doing. Thank you for all you do. Thanks for taking all of these experiences and taking such a period of vulnerability and loss and continued vulnerability and bringing that every day. So we really appreciate all you do. I do have to transition you a little bit. We're going to quick throw a few rapid fire questions your way, and then we'll close out with one final question for you for the day. But what I do want to share in the moment, so in this topic, we're talking about sort of the experience of being a suicide loss survivor and bringing that experience to the community and sharing awareness and ways to give back to the community through vulnerability and sharing stories. I do want to share an event that Lost and Found is fortunate to be a part of next July, actually, July 23rd, 2021. It's the first annual Ben's Long Ball Classic. The Longley family of Sioux Falls lost their son to suicide at the age of 22 this past year. And out of that experience and out of sort of the grief that they had to experience, they've chosen to partner with Lost and Found and find ways to spread a message of hope through golf. And so we encourage you to take a look at the website. It's bit.ly/longballclassic. Hosting it again, July 23rd, 2021. It'll be at Grand Falls Casino and Resort. If you're like me and you're not much of a golfer, there are other things to do during the day as well. But figured it'd be good to share here and encourage folks who are watching to sign up and take a look. So do some quick rapid fire questions and then we'll close out. First question for you, favorite subject in school?
I hate to be that person, but I did really enjoy gym. But if I had to choose something more serious, I would say English.
Were you an athlete in school then?
I mean, I tried. Yeah, I played sports. Yes, you kind of needed everyone in those small towns, to be involved to make the team. So, yeah, I played sports.
I love it. Well, I can join you in sharing the same love for gym. So we're good. What's your favorite holiday?
Ooh, Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
What's your hidden talent?
Oh my gosh. I played piano for 12 years. I can't really anymore, so it doesn't qualify as a talent, but that's something that people wouldn't guess about me, I would say.
Well, we'll throw a piano in front of you and see what happens, I suppose. First concert you ever attended?
A country concert for sure. I honestly don't know, but it definitely would have been a country singer. I went to a lot of country concerts with my parents growing up.
Love it. And I guess I should say I have couple more questions for you. Favorite Sioux Falls restaurant?
Ooh, Swamp Daddy's is really good, and Looks.
I keep seeing looks. I really need to go to looks by the looks of it, pun intended.
So good. So good.
So good. Last rapid fire question for you. We're gathering a list of songs throughout the year of 2021 to gather for a playlist on Spotify towards the end of the year. What song do you think someone should listen to today?
Are we going for like an emotional song or like a hype song?
Anything you got.
I love This Is Me from The Greatest Showman soundtrack.
Okay. Good choice.
Mm-hmm.
We'll mark that one down. We'll share that in a Spotify playlist for those of you watching at the end of the year, but we'll post that in the comments for folks to pick up on. So final question for you, actual final question. From your perspective, not just as a suicide loss survivor, but just all of the identities that you carry, what are sort of 2, maybe 3 ways you would say we should be looking at improving the mental health care system in our state? And it can be a variety of ways you can approach it, but 2 to 3 things based on your experience. What are some things we should be trying to change?
I love this question, and I have some big dreams for it. But first and foremost, I think a lot of it starts with education, just like on any topic. And one thing that I think is super important that not just our state struggles with, states all across the United States, is we see a deficit in school counselors. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it is not required to have a school counselor in every school in the state of South Dakota. And like I said, I know there's a deficit of school counselors, but I think we need to start there. But also we need to give them manageable loads. I mean, the responsibilities that fall on the shoulders of school counselors, whether it's college prep or meeting the mental health needs of students and everything in between. I know at some of those small rural schools, a lot of other things fall on their plates too. And so really taking a look at that role and making it manageable and making it a place where it can actually they can do their job that they're there and intended to do. I think that would be a really great start, is making sure that there's at least one school counselor in every school, but then also being able to meet the needs of what the ratios of counselors to students would be. I think that is just so important and so crucial in having that education start early on, and also having that resource be able to actually get students the help that they need. And so, that would be one of my dreams. Another dream would just kind of be looking at the psychiatric residential treatment system for youth. Like I said, I really, really loved that job. And it's an incredibly important job, working with a very vulnerable population of youth. But also when you look at like the profile of that job, the qualifications that are required and the pay that those employees receive, it doesn't quite add up. And I think that is, like I said, another big dream of mine that would I would love to have be addressed. And I think it's gotten better for sure. I know there was a situation brought to light by, I think, South Dakota Public Broadcasting a year or so ago that kind of looked into it a little more, the quality of care in residential treatment centers. But I think that there's always ways to improve. And then lastly, so this is not necessarily it's nothing that the state can do, but something that I think is really important that I really, really want to be brought to light before our time is done is the importance of acknowledging the role of the caregiver in the relationships of dealing with and loving someone with a mental illness. And I think it's important that mental illnesses are talked about broadly, and it's not just depression and anxiety, it's bipolar, it's disorder, it's addiction, it's all of the different mental health disorders that affect those in our communities, and really taking a look at how that affects the caregivers too, and how maybe it has effects on their mental health as well. I mean, I just think about everything that I went through as the child of a father with severe depression and anxiety, and what I watched my mom experience and the pressures that were put on her. And I think about how much better I probably could have been, and like what I didn't realize that my mom was going through either. And I just think that is so important, that it's not just necessarily the person with the mental illness that is struggling, it's those that love them too. And so that is something really, really important that I just want people to think about when talking about mental health and experience and the different experiences that people go through.
Thanks for being putting that out at the end too. I think it's really important to highlight that point. As you mentioned, there's a lot to caregiving, and we think often of, and maybe this is just a cultural norm that we're still figuring out at this point, of we often think of caregiving in the physical health sense, but we may not always think of it in the mental health sense. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And of course, we hear you loud and clear on the need for more counselors and finding that right ratio. So thank you for highlighting those needs. Wendy, is there anything else you want folks to hear today before we drop off?
Just remember that everybody is going through something, and even the happiest people still feel deep pain, whether they show it or not. And just to give others grace.
I love that. No, thank you, Wendy, so much for joining us today. And thank you for sharing your perspective, your vulnerability, your story, all the above. It was great to have you.
Yes. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Wendy. So let's close out today. As we always do, we try to share some quick updates and potentially some new content coming next week. We'll be hosting Ashley Lang. We'll be talking about sort of the ways self-awareness can contribute to our personal resilience. But really what I want to kind of highlight as we close out the day is, if you want to get to know Wendy and the work that's happening at Augustana, simply go to the website, augie.edu, to learn more about Augustana and the ways that they support the Sioux Falls community. But to learn more about the Augustana Lost&Found chapter, search on Facebook or Instagram. Their handle is We Are Here Augie. That will get you the latest updates on the work that students at Augustana are doing alongside their fantastic co-advisors, one of which is Wendy, to advance the needs of mental health resources on campus, and have these conversations and continue to advance these conversations on their campus. I want to highlight today something as we close out. One of our partner campuses, and the place where Lost&Found was founded, was the University of South Dakota. And today they're going through, as many universities do, an annual Giving Day. It just happens to be something a little bit different this round, in which their Women in Philanthropy group is actually conducting an entire fundraising campaign just focused on student mental health. So I wanted to highlight that here today as we close out. If you'd like to support students here in South Dakota who are actively working to increase the access and mental health resources and the very counselors that Wendy was talking about, you can support a campaign at the University of South Dakota today by going to uniteforusd.org/organization/USD-mental-health. And you can go and donate any amount, really, to help unlock additional funding and donations for counseling services at the University of South Dakota. And we want to highlight today, not because we're necessarily focused on just one campus, but the fact that we partner with so many campuses in South Dakota. It's important to highlight the work that they're each individually doing to advance their work, and sharing the stories and experiences and vulnerability that every student and staff member, faculty member, administrator has and has experienced with mental health. So That is all we have for this week. I really thank you for joining us this week for Voices of Resilience. I'm Eric Mucky. This has been Lost and Found, and we're happy that you've joined us today. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.
We are compassionate.
We are inclusive.
We are responsive.
And we are here.